He was born 3,500 years ago. In that time, there was a decree to get rid of all the male babies. His mother put him in a basket, a little ark, and there a princess found him called Hatshepsut. She fell in love with this beautiful Hebrew boy. Eventually, an arrangement was made that the biological mother would feed the child till he gets to the age of 12. And then the princess Hatshepsut took this baby into the palace. So he came from a shack to the palace. And eventually this slave boy accepted a position of rulership in the palace. He was so brilliant that the Pharaoh who ruled at that time, Thutmose II, decided that this little boy, adopted child, would become the next great Pharaoh. What would you have done receiving an offer like that? And I think while Moses stood here just before he died, he reflected on his life. How he refused the position of the mightiest man, the wealthiest man on this planet. I just want to tell you something about his scholarship, his academic side. He could read hieroglyphics and cuneiform, but God planned that he should write the holy books in a different alphabet. And 150 years before he came to the scene of action, they were developing two alphabets, one from Ugarit, Ras Shamra in Syria, and the other one at Serabit al-Qadim. And Moses learned from these alphabets how to develop and how to write in a new alphabet. So we are much indebted to the work of Moses. And remember, there was a conflict between monotheism. His mother brought him up as a monotheist, believing in one unseen creator God. And in the palace, they had the conflict of polytheism, which was an alluring religion, essential religion. He decided to stick to what his mother taught him. And after the 10 plagues, many of the Egyptians, polytheistic Egyptians, decided that the religion of Moses is what they want. And when they moved out of Egypt, when the Exodus began, many Egyptians were influenced by the religion of Moses, monotheism. But what about the royalty? I like to do research in this direction. Eventually we come to a pharaoh called Amenhotep III. Eventually his son Amenhotep IV changed his name to Akhenaten. He built a city called Akhetaten. His wife was Nefertiti, the most beautiful Egyptian woman in history. And he called his daughters Meketaten, Meritaten, Neferuaten, Ankensenpaten. Everything ends on A-T-E-N. Monotheism. For a while there was monotheism in Egypt. And then he moved with his people through the desert. But Moses was the most humble, patient man in antiquity. He was the most learned man that ever walked on the soil that you see. You have to have patience, because when you read the history of this man, you realize that he had a hard time. They moaned from the time they left Egypt until they almost entered the Promised Land. At one stage, God wanted to blot out the rebels and make him a new generation. Twice he refused to become the new Pharaoh. He was unselfish, compassionate, meek, This is the life of Moses. And when you look at the laws he gave us, it's different to the laws of antiquity, because he speaks to the heart. Thou shalt not covet. And this is wonderful. Do not covet, because this is where everything starts. And his 10 codes begin with the thought that God delivered them from Egypt. While Moses was standing here, this is the stuff that went through his mind. And then God said, Moses, I think it's time to go to bed. Put on your pajamas. And I can see the man walking up here, slowly, slowly, looking back to the camp of Israel, with tears in his eyes. Just before he died, he said, God, I'm sorry. I've disappointed you. Right at the end, he lost his temper. He took glory for himself, which only belongs to God. One source that I consulted said that while he was looking at the promised land, which he would never enter, and he would die, he saw a vision of what Israel was going to be like. He also saw the degradation, and the vision took him to the end of time, when God would make an end to misery and gave us heaven. He was the child of a slave and the son of a king. He was born in a hut and lived in a palace. He inherited poverty and enjoyed unlimited wealth, and we saw it at the Karnak temple. He was the leader of armies and the keeper of flock. What a contrast. He was the mightiest of warriors and the meekest of men. And of course, he was educated in all the wisdom of Egypt in a palace in the court. Yet, this brilliant man dwelt in a desert. He had the wisdom of Egypt at his command and the faith of a little child. What a man. He was fitted for a city life, but he wandered in the desert, in the wilderness. He was backward in speech. He said, God, I cannot speak to Pharaoh. But he spoke to God. He had the rod, an ordinary shepherd's rod, and the power of the infinite. He was a fugitive. He had to flee from Egypt. But he was also an ambassador of heaven. No man assisted him in his funeral up here, yet God buried him. As I said previously, opposite Beth Peor is the place where Elijah was translated. And then everything faded before this great man, and he died.